So now's your chance, Dave. No, I thought for sure you were going to say it again. Anyway.
Fuck off, Tom. and interrupted Paul as you did it.
Yeah. That's good. A welcome
Thank you for proving the point.
A welcome interruption. So, all right. So Dave sent me this interesting Rand Fishkin blog post. And the blog post was really about disparaging small businesses and what he referred to as lifestyle businesses. And, you know, we shouldn't be always obsessed with, you know, that one business out of a portfolio of 100 businesses that are being picked up by private equity that's going to make it big. And meanwhile, they kind of trample over a lot of those smaller businesses and they get sort of washed out the backside of things. And, you know, people who are employing people happily. And I think many of us have had this experience before. And, you know, people are getting along. You could maybe do better. But in this attempt to get a buyout, you know, you essentially crush good businesses, you know. So it was in that article that there was a video of Rand Fishkin being interviewed, and it was mostly about brand. But as you all know, Rand Fishkin, we've talked about it on the show before, maybe when it was an in-person show. So, you know, Rand Fishkin's been, you know, ringing the warning bell about Google sort of stealing all of our search traffic, right? So, you know, if you type in, where is Thoughtcast Media located, you're not going to go to my page. You're going to go to a snippet of, you know, with my address and things like that. So it keeps people off of our pages. He's pretty pessimistic for the long term of that, thinking that a lot of these, you know, a lot of that traffic is going to be sort of taken by Google. So his advice earlier was, look, you need to, you know, build your empire on your own platform, right? So, and we've heard this about social media all the time. You can't run a business off of Facebook. You know, you have to, you know, because you don't own Facebook. So they can do all sorts of things too, as they did, 4 years ago when they made it virtually impossible for corporate pages to get any sort of traction. You had to buy advertising. I get it. But at the same time, it's you know, kind of thin ice to build out all of your assets on somebody else's platform. And I never thought that Google would be one of those platforms that could perhaps go that way, but it looks like maybe there's some argument to be made that it is. So what he essentially said. Oh, first of all, I should ask who had a chance to watch the video.
I watched it.
Okay, watch it. Okay. All right, so what he essentially said is, he said, what's really working now, the question was, what do you think the future of content marketing is going to be? And he said, I think it's going to be episodic content, where you build content that is, and I'm paraphrasing here, so beware, that is entertaining and engaging and thoughtful and insightful, and it causes people to, you then build an audience around that, because it's really in some ways harkening back to the days when we used to do that with blog posts, right? You used to say, well, I read this blog post or I read that blog post. But now the best practice has moved dramatically. It's how do we, you know, out of the 100 blog posts we're going to publish in the next couple of months, how do we target the right keywords in the hopes that one of them, you know, shoots to the top and gets a little bit of organic distribution to it. And so that was the whole move to skyscraper content and things like that. So what Fishkin is saying is that, no, you need to build sort of episodic content that people want to go back to over and over again. And that has certain implications. So it's really got to be kind of on the same topic. And more importantly, I think I know it needs to have some sort of entertainment value and some sort of value that is assigned to the way that the content is presented. So just wanted to talk about that. Dave, did I get that right? I know you watched it.
Yeah, I think so. You know, one way he kind of did it quickly, instead of creating one piece of content that you're trying to get in front of tons of people, you know, you're trying to create a series of content or episodic content that you grow with, that your fans grow with, and that you're actually becoming fans and creating a fan base. And interestingly, I think that kind of goes in line with what David Meerman Scott, you know, the guy who wrote the New Rules of Marketing and PR, very well known in the marketing world. His latest book is called Fanocracy. I haven't read it, but I've just seen a lot of his stuff for it because I'm on his newsletter. But it's all about building a fan base, you know, and he always goes back to his favorite band of all time, which is the Grateful Dead, and how they were the first guys that shared their content, allowed anybody to record their stuff and share it freely, and that they were way ahead of the game, because he loves music and stuff like that. But it's interesting that those two kind of go in connection. But yeah, instead of that, create that ebook and then try to get a bunch of people to download it and then see it and find it and base all your strategy on keywords. Rand Fishkin was talking about building an audience. And the other thing I'll add too is that if you look at SparkToro, which is this company that he started after leaving the Moz, and also the Moz did their Whiteboard Wednesdays, I think it was, or Whiteboard Fridays, I can't remember what he called it. Whiteboard Fridays, which was basically episodic content, right? While he was still at the Moz, and then he left there. But SparkToro, the new company that he started with software, is moving away from like SEO type stuff and helping you to identify who, you know, where your audience is, what they're consuming, how they're interacting and engaging, so that you can better build this audience. So some of the video and the blog post are connected to his methodology and his product in a sense, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of this harkens back to the old days. The analogy I would draw, which is not a perfect analogy, but like I like to read George Will. I will pretty much read anything George Will writes. I disagree with him sometimes, but I like to read him, and I don't depend on, you know, George Will's latest article hitting the right keywords that I'm searching for. And again, it's not a perfect analogy, but he's built this fan base, and I'm part of that base. Tom, what was your?
I thought it was very interesting. I thought the whole interview was very interesting. They covered a lot of stuff, and on the episodic part, I heard more of what Dave was talking about and what you were talking about right at the end of your introduction. That is building an audience, and the episodic sort of referred to something recurring that engages, and engagement was a big term they used a lot. Content was the tactic to do that, and but it's the longevity of the relationship that you build with. I love the idea of fans as an audience that matters. You know, I just saw an article the other day. I actually didn't read the whole thing, but part of it was saying once you're Netflix, and we're talking about Netflix doesn't have to have stellar content. Right. Mediocre content works pretty well, yeah, because they've got the audience and people get engaged with a series. They come back and watch it, even though maybe it's not the best thing on television, but they've been captured and engaged as an audience. So I think that episodic part, that longevity part, and the personal brand, even if it's multiple people writing, seems to be pretty important.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did reference the Netflix world of content marketing.
Right.
Right. So.
Oh, that's right. He even used that, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd forgotten that.
So based on our three descriptions of that, what are those of you who didn't get a chance to watch the video, any reactions to that, this idea of episodic content?
I think it's just another way to reposition like the broader concept of content marketing, right? It continues to evolve in the sense that everybody's now generating content, and now the next wave, how it seems, when needs to have more of a personality, right? Where content marketing before was very educational as opposed to salesy, right? Like let's be a thought leader, and those were the key words that are throwing out. And now when you think about brand and personality, it's another way to kind of differentiate yourself or distinguish yourself amongst all this noise of everybody trying to do it, and probably just raises the bar a little about the quality of that content, right? And maybe it's just another, push towards just being authentic, right? It will be hard for brands that aren't necessarily witty or, have a personality per se, and I can't think of an example, but it's true.
Going on this call.
Me, right here.
But like just listening to it and just briefly, in the 10 minutes before the call, kind of, trying to do some research on Paul's email, that was my first takeaway, not having seen the video, but then listening to you guys. And it seems like, again, a valid point to differentiate yourself if it works, right? But it's got to be authentic. You can't be trying to be witty or funny or have a personality if it doesn't fit the brand or your personal brand, right? Like we all work with colleagues from whether, a sales or marketing standpoint that are public facing, and some are just much more comfortable in that role or not, right? So you're almost going to have to find the equivalent of that brand evangelist who can also fulfill this role, right? Because I would imagine with the content comes a level of presentation, and then you got to pull it off, right? You got to be that personality and engaging and witty and humble and all those things that might play, various things that might play in your market.
That's very interesting because they use those words, authentic and transparency. And I love the example that was given of not being transparent to share information that is all the good news, right? The example being that if you're being transparent and tell you how much profit and how many sales and how much of growth we had last month. He said, that's not being transparent. Being transparent is telling people the stuff that you don't want to have to reveal or something along those lines. But it adds to the authenticity of it and makes people feel more like there's a personal engagement.
Well, from a brand standpoint, and this goes on a human level too, if all you hear is how good things are, it makes you wonder what's being hidden, right? And from a software standpoint, when, if someone says, what's on your roadmap? And you're like, oh, we've got everything covered, right? Like you're either not thinking about it, you're not smart, or you're certainly not telling the truth, right? Because there's always room to evolve, and there's always room to either address new challenges that the market presents itself or new objectives or just to further differentiate yourself from your competitors, right? So everyone that says it's always sunny, right? Like that's the warning sign for me of like, nope.
Well, I think this approach is definitely.
You really trust Paul then, huh?
This approach is definitely very brand centric. You're right about that. Like this episodic content needs to be a reflection of that brand, both the corporate brand and the personal brand of the person doing it. So Patrick Berzai, you sit on top of tons of videos. Does this ring true for you? I mean, are your customers moving in this direction?
I don't know. I definitely wanted to listen on this call because I think my opinion of Rand Fishkin is probably different than everybody else's opinion. I'll just say briefly, I think it's interesting that an SEO complains about Google stealing anything. That's all SEOs do is steal their ad clicks. So I've actually taken Fishkin to task on this. He has not liked it. I don't know if he recalls the little gnat that is Pat Berzai, but I mean, it's true, right? I think though that this is a very you're right, brand centric. I tend to take a very customer centric approach to this. So issues like this, I don't come to the same conclusion as a Fishkin. I didn't watch the video, and that kind of goes back to what I was just saying about Rand Fishkin. I think that are you looking to build a fan base or a customer base, right? You might be able to get customers from fans, but most of the times fans aren't really going to be your customer. They might evangelize you, but to other people who will also then just evangelize you. And if you have your metrics around that, then maybe that's why search doesn't work for Rand Fishkin. I would say that search is not the end of anything or the beginning. It is a method of getting there. The one thing about winning in search is it's intent driven. So when someone's in that mindset, an intent driven mindset, you definitely want to win. And how much you win is depending on what kind of words they're searching and where you want to win, and which one of those words you want to win. And then the easy concept there is when information is cheap, like on Google, attention becomes expensive. So which kind of effort am I going to put against all of these intent-driven behaviors? And I think that's really what it is. It's behaviors. Fishkin's talking about the behavior of your website or your audience. I'm talking about the behavior of your consumer. I'm more concerned with that. So that's why Fishkin and I don't tend to agree on a lot of things.
So how does the customer-centric angle play out in content as opposed to the audience-centric model?
It's very journey-driven, but around the customer decision. So there's typical questions that people tend to ask on the pathway to purchase. And if you understand where those are, and that's where you have to kind of mitigate your time as you triage where you're going to make content. But if someone's like, I don't know, let's pick an industry, computers. What's the best PC for me? Am I going to win that query? Probably not. It's probably going to be some publishers or whatever. So what do I have to do? If I want to win that query, if I think I need to get people when they're starting, I need to buy my way onto there. So and that's expensive people to win, but you're also looking at conversion, right? So what do they do next? A lot of times you're not going to win anybody there. So you start with your best converting things and work your way backwards. That's your content strategy. And your content strategy is not about getting your content to rank. It's about getting your landing pages to rank. So what you're really doing is trying to just support your landing pages as your content strategy, not build an audience, So when you, and sometimes when you write content, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters how good content is because being shared is a signal that Google can find. I mean, they crawl Twitter. So if your stuff's being shared, that's a virality signal, let's say. And then that just, compounds by a lot of things like linking and all that kind of stuff. But it's usually the way the words match. As long as you're piping that in a relevant way up to your landing pages, that's how you win. And then you're just checking your conversion rates on your landing page. So all you meant to do is get your landing pages to rank. You want to win on your landing pages because you understand what when your customer's in that right mindset, when they go from, what was the example? Like computers. I want to say like Samsung versus Apple, if I win that comparative query. And then if they're still comparing people, then I type Samsung. So Samsung is the one I'm going to win. I'm using broad terms, but it's probably like a specific name, product name or something like that. And then you just work backwards, right? So that's how you win at search.
But wouldn't you agree though that it would be better to, rather than having random people, search and find their way to you, wouldn't you agree it'd be better to have an audience, and maybe not have an audience that like, look, I want to see what Patrick Berzai has to say?
I think audiences are more important when they're publishers, personally, that they're building the audience. But when you're a business, you're more concerned, your audience is your customer.
I think that those are interesting points, Patrick. I think that what I heard in the interview, the one answer they would have is they're taking, rightly or wrongly, they're taking a longer view. There was a lot of talk about longer views and brand identity. There was a piece of this, despite the fact that they railed quite a bit against the venture capitalist models, but there was still a part about building brand equity that could later be sold to somebody. So they would argue, I think, the longer term versus the shorter term. Your point about audience versus customers reminds me of way back when websites were first, the rage, and everybody talked about traffic, right? How many hits did you get? And how many people came? And it took a while before people began to ask, well, a lot of people came to our site, but are they the right people that came to our site? And so so if you do buy into the audience, fan club, whatever, it's always important to keep that other piece in mind that says, is the audience actually the audience we want to engage? And that's another question. That's a whole nother question.
Yeah. So Patrick, your dislike for Rand Fishkin aside, and I can't help but think that I should be producing
2 weeks in a row of rare. Yeah, sorry, guys.
an episodic, some episodic content called, Patrick Berzai hates Rand Fishkin. We can do 6 episodes of that, I'm sure. But
At least 6 episodes.
do you see anything, any validity in this argument that Google is in fact stealing people's visitors, I guess?
Not really. I personally don't. I mean, if you look at behaviors, that's what's important, and then all the other stuff falls away. If someone Googles you and they get to your like knowledge panel, they probably just wanted your phone number, whether they get to your site or not. When he's talking about the local stuff, like that's where, when you were mentioning that, I hope I'm misunderstanding, but like that's kind of a duh. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to get to the website for that. So nothing bad happened. In terms of the other stealing of traffic, I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to, but the way that people behave is something you have to track, not your traffic. If your brand queries go up and you get more customers into your store and your local store, that whatever you're doing is making people look for you. Oh yeah, that's where they are, and then you can track it to business. That's just a rudimentary way of looking at it.
I think the question, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, is that if I can do a Google search and what comes up is a snippet from my website on Google that may answer a question like that, that robs me of the opportunity to take advantage of the fact that you've arrived at my website for some purpose, to expose you to other things to pull you into my website. You tend to just then go on. And that to me is the real hard part for brands and websites, is they may never get to your website.
Well, the other thing I'll add there is that in that analysis that Rand Fishkin did, it was more pronounced on mobile devices than on desktop. So you could argue that, when you're on a mobile device, you don't want to go to Paul's website. You just want Paul's phone number because you're on your phone, right? So that is interesting. Although when Google is displaying information from your website on their own website, and I think some of the examples, he used a bunch of examples.
Did he mention Rap Genius?
It was I don't know. I don't think so. He did mention like Beyonce or something like that, but it was a keynote in the UK like a year and a half ago or something like that he did at some British SEO event. And he was just showing examples of where there was a lot of information being pulled from a website and being displayed in Google in results. And there's also, I'm forgetting it now because I don't deal with it that much at all, but like where you can do like the Google business pages or whatever, you can actually put in your information, and then it's even more that you're providing the information, but then they're staying even more. It's almost they're replicating parts of your website, right? And so then you're not getting that traffic, which may help you rank. It could help for a lot of reasons. So yeah, the mobile side, you could say, because it was more pronounced, and the declines were like, it was gradual, starting in like 2017 when there was a code change made, whichever was Panda or whatever, I forgot what their names are, it just kept going down, the amount of traffic that was leaving Google going to websites, and he did it across like multiple, a pretty big analysis, which I thought was interesting, and he wasn't answering or giving, he's just saying, you guys got to be aware of this, right? Like this, you could be, and it was something like maybe 10 or 15%, maybe more over a year and a half of the analysis that he did. That would make me a little bit nervous,
Yeah, and it wasn't just like people looking for phone numbers and addresses. I mean, I do this all the time, and I use the Google results. Like, what did I just did the other day? I was trying to do something on PowerPoint. How do I do X, Y, and Z in PowerPoint? And they served me up the answer from somebody's website without me going there. So that robbed that person arguably of the opportunity to sell me on their solution for doing that in PowerPoint, things like that. So
what it robbed them of the ability to do is annoy you after 3 seconds by popping up something like join our mailing list and make you close the browser immediately.
So maybe they saved you.
Yeah, actually, Google's really, I didn't think about that. Google's, okay, we're done for this week, guys. See ya next week.
Was the video saying that if from a marketer standpoint that you should consider or more strongly consider having more bite-sized pieces of content or, you know, episodic content, because that would somehow minimize this Google kind of,
No.
so what is the tie? I missed that.
What do you mean? Well, I'll tell you what, let's go to the video. I mean, it's only, let me see.
Go to the videotape.
Go to the video.
Man. Thought I could avoid it.
No, I think it was just a different.
It was a really interesting interview. It was just an interview. It wasn't him ranting. He was being interviewed by director of marketing for Typeform, who has episodic content show that he does.
You're going to have to gaze upon your nemesis here, Patrick. I'm sorry.
And it wasn't
back.
He's not wearing a Red Sox hat, though.
I didn't think there was any suggestion it was snippets. Could be columns, could whatever. It was just that it had an ongoing engagement.
It's most likely video too.
It is most likely video or podcast. See, Dave, I remember the word podcast.
My name
Good
is
for
Paul.
you.
So can you guys see this?
I was helping people.
Yep.
from California's most.
I want to go to
notorious
the
state prison
very
to
end
find
here. I
jobs.
think it was right here.
For Friday.
So he gave him a pad of paper and said, do a whiteboard Friday for him.
Oh, this is going to be OG Whiteboard Friday.
Yeah, OG whiteboard.
like 2007 again.
I guess the last big question is, how should people think about content marketing now?
I think we have moved from a world where individual pieces of content marketing could stand out to a world where that is not going to be a differentiating factor.
Right.
I believe the future of great content marketing.
Could you jot these points down?
Yeah.
And this is
So
our whiteboard Friday.
I think that old days you had this like, you know, I produce individual pieces of content and I target keywords, and if they're really great or if they hit some notion of whatever is amplification worthy or viral worthy, that can really transform my content marketing. Yeah. And now, what I believe we're in is sort of the, maybe it's fair to call it like the Netflix world of content marketing.
Right.
And what I mean by that is Netflix content marketing is essentially not individual points, but rather episodic content.
Right.
Something that gets produced over time, and then you get addicted to it and you love it and you share it, and it starts with often a very small audience, but grows to a bigger one, right? And so it's not these individual pieces of content, but rather instead it's X, and then X2, and then X3. And so this episodic content world, I think, is where we are headed. If you want to build great, sustainable, long-term content marketing, it's not about getting one piece of content in front of the maximum number of people, but rather finding an audience that content over time, episodic content that you can repeat and grow with and keep producing, that they will stick with and amplify, that they will grow that group, that word of mouth and all the other forms of sharing will spread it.
This turns into
it turns into
that flywheel, that thing
turns into
that gains steam over time.
Exactly, right? Because you have a few people who are watching, and that turns into like a bunch more people watching, and then they tell their friends, and suddenly you get like this big group of tons of people watching, and they become fans. And that, I think, is a powerful addition to the content flywheel, to the content loop, right?
So we're being more collaborative as far as building products.
Yeah.
But what about marketing?
But
You see
what
that
about
this is happening
marketing
now.
should be a product.
Okay, that's kind of it. So aside from the fact that he's obviously a horrible human being, Patrick Bursai, so did that make any more sense to you? Do you still disagree vehemently and spitefully and hatefully?
No, I think what I'd say is,
way.
yeah, like the winter, or the fall. I'm sorry, the fall. What I would say is that, so you know how he's drawing X1, X2, X3. The part he left out is either willfully, which sometimes I think he does, and I'll tell you why, or accidentally, is that connects up to a single page, you know? That becomes a theme and a cluster. If you know how Google indexes its content, its semantic web, that's how you do that. It's crawling areas of high centrality of content based on the words. It understands intent implicitly. So if he didn't tell you that, which I don't think he did accidentally, he's telling you that because he's trying to sell you something. Because if you don't do that, then you're always going to need him. But if you do that and you understand that, then you're not going to need a Rand Fishkin. You know what I mean? So that's kind of in a nutshell how I look at it. I think that a lot of SEOs confound you and gain dependency, and some educate, enlighten, and lift you, and then you understand implicitly, and then you rely on their expert skills. So maybe that's where he's trying to get, not sure. I think the more you know about SEO, the more you understand that Rand Fishkin's always pitching. He's not educating. So that would be my last rare of the day.
I think that's interesting, Patrick, because right at the beginning, I think after Paul opened it up, I gave a little bit more, and I was saying that, you know, when I went back after watching the video and went back and looked at SparkToro, the product, you know, he's doing that HubSpot thing where they took inbound marketing and they connected it to their platform, right? I think they did it in a brilliant way because they get you to do inbound marketing by using their platform, which you just don't see a lot with software. But he's basically saying that too. It's like, I think I was just on the SparkToro. Instantly discover what your audience reads, watches, listens to, and follows, right? That's their headline on the SparkToro website. And so when you get into some of the guts of what SparkToro is, it's what he's talking about. So I'm not sure as much is it being smart the way HubSpot did, like take the methodology and connect it with the software and you get that magic happen, or is it him in this thing here, you know, espousing his new product and trying to get people to shift away from what the Moz does over to SparkToro? Or did he see that over time, on the conversely, did he see over time that SEOs and people focusing heavily on SEO are going to struggle because the changes that are happening in algorithm changes by Google and stuff like that? I don't know which one it is. There are two compelling things there, though.
But isn't it proof positive from him? And I want to go back to something Patrick said earlier, but before that, isn't it proof positive? This is content that he's given, and let's say he is pitching. You know, it's episodic content on this guy's show that got at least Dave to go over to the SparkToro. I did too, to go over to the SparkToro webpage and start looking for that. But one thing I wanted to go back to, Patrick Berzai, that you said, which is this notion of, you know, it's more for publishers in a sense. But I mean, publishers who are trying to.
Aren't we all publishers?
We are, yeah, in a sense. But we want to get people to take action on our publishing. I don't know that, you know, Atlantic Magazine is trying to get people specifically to do that, but you know, certainly we are, and it's just a much softer sell. There's no two ways about it. I think, Patrick, you're right. I mean, okay, bye, Patrick. We'll see you when we see you. Thanks for coming. That, you know, by monitoring that intent, when you get people, the intent of people coming into a show like that is to just be entertained and be informed and so forth. You don't know if they're buying anything. So it is a bit of a looser, you know, way to appeal to what you hope is intent.
I mean, there's ways to find it though, Paul, and sorry to interrupt, but if you do a really good job at tagging your website and tagging your experience, you'll know when words connect to certain pages, you know? So when I'm typing a broad query, I'll notice they only really get to my blog and don't really take next steps, or their rate of conversion to take that next step is so low. I know when they type in my brand, that funnel is much more parallel because they have higher intent. So why would I spend all that time on my blog when I just could spend more time on my parallel funnel? So what Rand Fishkin does, I think, is design websites to rank. And it seems like he's thinking about the customer a little bit more, but what I'm trying to do is capture people when they're in a mindset. you know, I can either make them have that mindset by serving them an ad and then they think about my brand. He also did it by this to be sure, you know, if any of these people do finally decide to buy something like this, either in their current job or next job, he's got that audience to all your points. But there's a cheaper, easier, faster way to do that. And you could build a business much faster than doing this long slog. You notice that he's pitching and saying long slog. And I did say I wouldn't say anything bad, but it's like, it doesn't have to be a long slog. If you focus on an intent, try to win that intent. And the way you know you win it is by 1 or 2 landing pages. That's your SEO strategy. It's not lifting everything up. It's lifting 1 page up that you really care about, or 2 pages up that you really care about, and content that focuses into that. Like the stuff, like you don't need a long-term strategy here, although you want to do that long-term. Like that's the one thing that I've always like, SEOs try to sell you more SEO. It's like the military industrial complex, the SEO industrial complex, I'll call it. But that's what I kind of feel is the drawback of Baran Fishkin.
So one other thing I'll just add, and I think I wrote it down close to verbatim from one of the things he said. It made me think about it, and I was trying to find it here in my notes when you just mentioned, when you're talking about the brand. He said something like, instead of getting people, and he's referring to Typeform because the guy who's interviewing him was from Typeform. He says, instead of getting people to search for online surveys, focus on getting people to search for Typeform, for the name of the company, as opposed to online surveys, which you may or may not rank for.
Right.
Right. And that's kind of interesting. I think that concept is different, right? Yeah.
Well, what you would do is you would find out who should be looking for you, and then serve ads to the people who should be looking for you, and then they look for you in a winnable way. That's the easiest way to do it.
Interesting.
It's cheap too. And as long as you know the words, you can connect it all.
Yeah, he definitely ranked on like the Facebook, Google duopoly, as he called it.
It actually works really well together.
He's very anti that, right? He said something like, once you know your audience, how do I figure out what they're reading, the hashtags they use, the events they go to, and market to them through these, but not through Facebook and Google, which is, ironically, you could argue that's using his product to help you do it.
Can I ask a quick question? So he mentioned that he saw things go down in terms of their traffic on mobile over time, and he's against Google and Facebook. And
he did. That was separate. That was from like a year and a half ago when he showed that data of that happening.
Well,
Paul and I had talked about it earlier. We had talked about it on the show like 2 years ago, and we were just coming back to Rand Fishkin, and so that's where we connected the two things. Yeah, but they weren't in that interview.
I would argue they're connected. They're both mobile behaviors, and so if you stop winning a mobile behavior on Facebook, like showing an ad, you're going to get less mobile traffic. It's probably a vicious cycle. That's probably what we're looking at. I haven't seen the data, and I don't know, but that's probably what he's advising his customers to do. They do it, and then they lose branded traffic. That would be my guess.
His premise, and I'd ask you all whether
I feel like I'm like trying to attack somebody. I'm really sorry, but
no.
Not at all.
No. I think you're making some very, very good
conversation.
Points. It seemed to me that the whole premise of this at the beginning, even in that clip, was that there is so much noise out there that going about promotion in more traditional ways is just not going to work for companies. They're just not going to be visible. They're not going to be able to differentiate that way. There's just too much noise. Is that true? Do we think that's true?
There's a lot of noise.
I'm going to answer for Patrick and say that, yeah, if you're not good at doing that, yeah, there is too much noise and it's impossible to differentiate. It's hard to get people to, was that right, Patrick?
I would re-add that thing that I said, when information's cheap, attention becomes expensive. That's how you decide what noise you want to be involved in.
Yeah. I'm in your head, man.
You know what? Nobody invited you, Paul. Get out.
It's a scary
Go back
place.
to your death fucking season, would you?
I'm gonna leave. So, yeah, I will say this, that winning on episodic content, and he doesn't say this, it's really difficult. It's really hard.
To
And
produce.
you know, as we
Right.
talked about, you know, you've got to have the person, the sort of the personality behind it. You have to have a brand that can tolerate that. I've worked for brands that are like, wait a minute, what are we doing? You know, they're uncomfortable with that. And you know, to add entertainment into things, it's expensive. You know, it's not easy to do. And obviously Netflix is a very good example of what it costs to do episodic content. But I mean, you can do other things. What we're doing today and what we have been doing is a form of episodic content. And we just haven't attracted an
No
audience.
fans or buyers.
Yeah.
Man,
Well, we're not selling anything, but
we're
yeah,
not.
Here.
Oh, that's the problem.
you'd think we'd have. I think maybe people would like to come to the show just to watch Frank Gann and not say anything through the entire show. That's a possibility, you know. You got the quiet. We're like a Korean pop band, you know. We got the different personalities. Frank is the quiet, you know, handsome one, brooding. You know, you need to brood more. And you know, Dave's the fool, obviously, and you know, Patrick. And I'll leave it there.
I'm the
But,
catty
yeah,
one.
You're the cat.
Yeah.
You're the dangerous one.
The rare.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is expensive, man, and it's hard to do. And you know, we haven't really tried very hard at doing this. I mean, the first thing I would maybe do is, you know, to create more of a fan base is maybe send out the instructions of what we're talking about more than 3 hours before the show. So that's a possibility. So
you're trying to say we're not trying, and that's why it's like, oh, who's trying anyway?
that's right. Yeah, we
Well,
could
and
be if we
and
wanted to.
it's just hard to, they talk about episodic content. I think it's mostly video is my guess. I haven't done any research on what is episodic content marketing, you know, like, but my guess is it's probably video based,
Or podcast.
which does make, or audio. Yeah. It's not going to be written forms of content is my guess. It's really hard to do. And, you know, Paul and I, we were talking about this yesterday. Wistia has kind of gotten ahead of it by creating Wistia channels so that you can create channels, and YouTube has channels too, right? They had it probably way before Wistia did, but so that you can create episodic content. And then, you know, it's in Wistia, when one of your first video ends, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's the next video will start in 5, 4, 3, right? And so, and it gives you the title of, I think, or something like that, of the next episode, right? So getting you locked in to consume more content, and you can binge watch basically, you know, company content, right? So I don't know where I was going with that, but I forgot.
Well,
Go ahead,
it
Tom.
seems that the balance, one dimension of the balance is that it's harder to build than hitting a home run with a single piece of content. But if you are successful at building it, it's more resilient.
Arguably, but I wonder if it's not, you know, if people are just tuning in because it's kind of fun and kind of interesting. And you know, I'll give you a good example. Not that she's actually selling anything, but people tune into Kiki L'Italian all the time because she's good at what she does, and she's kind of fun, and people like her, and she brings interesting stuff. But I don't know that there's any intent there. And I wonder if we should have Kiki on the show. My guess is she would say that she's more of a publisher in that sense, and relying on, you know, people to say, you know, this woman really is good at what she does. We should ask her to host our next whatever. But there's no intention to capitalize on whatever intent there may be. That's really interesting.
I think what Christine is suggesting is kind of just like an extension of what SEOs and even Google themselves have been saying since like Penguin or whatever, that first big step in you know, semantic analysis or whatever, is that, you know, you should be creating content for the consumer of the content and not Google. So if you're just stuffing your articles with keywords and hoping to, you know, get traffic of a wide range of quality, then you're not serving the customer. And, you know, his suggestion to create episodic content, I think, is just one way to push in that direction of offering more value rather than trying to serve the needs of Google first and your customer audience second.
That's fair.
Yeah, I struggle with it because when I saw this, my head just lit up, and I thought this is really the greatest thing, because I'm kind of pre-wired for doing episodic content. That's what I like, and so.
Paul, from now on, when you watch Rand Fishkin, you'll think, oh man, Pat will hate this.
Yeah, I will.
That's what you'll think first now.
I still think we should do our 6-episode, mini series called Patrick Berzai Hates Rand.
We'll call it Rare, the story of Pat Berzai hating Rand Fishkin. But I don't know. I kind of think that when he does this, though, it's like Tom Brady teaches quarterback. You're like, is this going to help me? I'm entertained, but is this going to help me? Kind of stuff for various reasons. But I mean, to Frank's point, like what you really need to know is like whenever anyone looks at any of your content, you think of that user, right? That's the true north. Anything they're doing on your properties is a reaction, right? Whatever content it is, it says more about the user than the content. That's what I've discovered in both my organic and paid content worlds. So you want them to think 3 things, or you want to do 3 things. You want them to think something, you want them to feel something, and then you want them to do something, right? That's if you're really trying to get buyers, those are the 3 things you need to satisfy with every touch point. So at a keyword, when it's like, best kind of computer for me, it would be great if one of the results was me and they got them to click on me to associate me with best kind of computer, Samsung, something like that. That's the thing I want them to do. And then when they land on the landing page, which is going to be broader, probably say more about my computers, like more computers than a specific thing. It's like, well, here's the kind of computers. So you're like, oh, well, which one did they choose from there? And then you're just tracking that journey. Like that's how you do good SEO. And when you find those good journeys, like you optimize to the beginning of the journey, because that's what drives them there, intentionally. And then that's your strategy. That's all it really is, and then it doesn't make more sense to go after that high level strategy where you have to spend all this time, which is money, ranking for this term, which is impossible to rank for. Maybe throw a few bucks at it or not, or serve push ads rather than the pull ones, which is search, to get the people you think to search for the word you want, and then you get that automatic behavior that because it's higher intent anyway because it's lower funnel, right? That's an easy thing for any company, any size to do, whether Google's stealing your traffic, or whatever. Like that's like this is a different world. It's looking at the data in a different way. It's like the geocentric or website centric version of the world. And to Frank's point, I'm trying to look at SEO from a customer centric version of the world. And I've seen that win every time. Sometimes people win the other way.
All right. Any last words? We're out of time. Awesome discussion. I've been champing at the bit to hold this discussion. That was good stuff.
I got to be nicer next week, man. I got to be nicer. This is bad.
Don't.
Just don't be.
Don't. That would be boring.
Yeah,
that's bad.
True.
I don't think Paul could get any saltier, though.
Yeah, maybe I'm still second star of the game. If
Says the fool.
Yeah, the fool.
You have to remember your role, Patrick.
Also, didn't Paul play the fool in the Beatles? He says, sometimes I play bass and sometimes I play the fool. Or was that John? That was John. So I guess the fool's the one that makes everything go.
You're barking up the wrong Beatle. Yeah. So yeah, that could be. Well, he's the creative engine, right? And also he's the speaker of truth. I mean, look at King Lear, right? The only one who says anything truthful is the fool. So congrats, David. Embrace your
foolishness.
Your foolishness, your fool status. And by the way, I wanted to comment. I love the sweatpants. Those look great.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, when I went over there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, like I'm like here all day long. Who cares?
Yeah, I gotcha. You don't want to know what I'm not wearing under this shirt. So, or under this, below the fold, as it were. Okay, guys, great stuff. And we'll all talk later, huh?
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.